I've always found that all sound is equal in a way. Whether it's a sound I've recorded on my phone when I was in Liverpool in the pouring rain, recording the sound of the rain falling on a kind of metal sheet above me in the shopping centre in the centre of Liverpool, and the wonderful resonance it created, that has equal value to me processing an oscillator through a filter with an envelope generator, whatever it may be. You know, they can tell the same story, kind of sonically in a way. What I try and do is make the two things speak together. I've always used environmental sound. So under here, there's a box, 2 boxes of cassettes. And they are my earliest recordings from 1977. So we used to have a cheap plastic tape recorder and record everything, my brother and I, just in our house. Not because we thought we were going to be artists, because we had the technology. We had this cheap plastic tape recorder. Why not record Mum cooking dinner? Why not record football on television? Why not record, as I once did, the freezer and then switch the freezer off and record the sound of it switching off, which didn't go down very well with my mother, as you might imagine. But I've always been led, in a way, by the technologies at times, in some sense, you know, what they've allowed me to do. So the advent of portable digital recording devices was phenomenal to me. Well, not even digital. When I first had recording cassette recorders, these small analog machines, suddenly the world opened up to me. I began with a reel-to-reel, and I could record sounds in my bedroom with a microphone out of the window. But now I could record my school friends. I could record on the bus, on the London Underground, all these kind of sounds. And to me, that was really liberating. It's something maybe people take for granted, that you can just record everywhere now, but sometimes it's worth pausing for a moment and thinking about those developments. So when somebody asks me, are there times you don't have any inspiration? I think, well, how would that be possible when there are so many possibilities? You know, I can take a recording of ice melting, slow it down by an octave, run it through a reverb or something, and you've got this other worldly ambient sitting there, and I can add something else on top of that, maybe me playing percussion on a wooden bench in a park, or something I put through a sample in here, or a rhythm I make in this set. It doesn't mean everybody has to hear this stuff either. You know, these boxes of cassettes that I reference, it's unlikely anybody's ever going to hear pretty much anything I ever recorded on those. But for me, it's an amazing resource towards other possibilities in the future. We are in the East Midlands, in the UK, in a former textile factory. So this building used to be where they made men's suits and women's stockings, 2 of my favourite things. It's funny, when I first moved here, people would come in from outside, literally in the first week, because the building had been empty for years, and they came in and said, oh, I used to work here, and oh, I used to work here. And so quite remarkable, it has that kind of history in a way. It's been here since 1895. I've always thought it's not a job that I do, you know, it's me, it's who I am and what I do, but it is a place of work. I generally don't come here at the weekend. I come here Monday to Friday, sometimes at the weekend, but very rarely. But I come in here early in the morning, and I work all day until 5:30. I speak to some people and they're surprised I lead such a kind of disciplined schedule, but it works for me. Perhaps it doesn't work for someone else. So some people say, how do you start what you do? Same as when you write and you have a blank piece of paper or something in a Microsoft Word document. You have to start somewhere. So I just start, and I start making sounds and start making noises or whatever it may be, and it turns into something else. So I enter this space, and it's a space of inspiration, really. I have a big toy cupboard behind you, over here, behind me, lots of toys to play with, and each of them offers something new and fresh that engages me and sort of pushes me in different directions each time. I absolutely think work should be fun, if possible, you know. I used to work in real jobs, in the real world, in a sense, a more 9-to-5 existence, but I had fun jobs. I worked in a music library. The fun was discovering music, learning about music. less fun was dealing with members of the public who could be very demanding and very rude at times. But, you know, if at all possible in one's life, you should try and embrace things that make your heart happy and make you want to return to that the next day. So any kind of roles I've played in my life in terms of occupation, I've always hoped would be something I want to actively return to. Here I talk about play, I talk about work, but they're kind of the same thing. Play is absolutely essential to all of our lives, I think. If we focus too much on everything being work, it could be dangerously anti-creative in a way. When I say work though, sometimes it means I've got a commission and somebody has asked me to write music for a ballet and I have to deliver a certain amount of music by a certain time. If I don't have that, I need to schedule myself, and that's more play work. So I suppose you could call it work play or play work, depending on the project. So I have different setups here in the studio in a way. Lots of people have all their gear all midied up so it sits into one central system, and I've never done that. I tried and found it so boring because it just set me into a kind of system. I'd switch all the plugs on, it would all be there, and I'd feel a bit paralyzed by choice, which you can easily say with all this sitting behind me. But what I generally do is think, I need to create a rhythm. How will I do this? So I set about creating a rhythm within the system. I so often don't use sequencers in music. I never use them live. I use them in the studio more. I have a few on both of these systems, but don't often use them in the kind of traditional way of just making melodies in that way. I have behind you a kind of more jam system, which is more things like Roland synths and these kind of things. And they allow me just a kind of play session. I release music under different names at times as well. So I had a project for sometimes Scanner Funk, which was a more kind of dance side. And so this kind of setup with the more jam session lends itself more to that rhythmic side of things. This is more soundtracky, abstract, ambient, whatever one wants to call it. I have lots of gear sitting in a rack over here, which actually is stuff I can lift up and put over here and plug into the main system and run things through. I have these two kitchen tables. These are trolleys for kitchens, and they're on wheels, which means I can just wheel them in. I can have different setups and wheel them in, connect them into the computer. I enjoy the different setups, the different inspiration that comes from that, you know. I don't want to get locked into a pattern. That's what I'm trying to avoid always. I tend to think that a piece succeeds for me that I make if it has an emotional resonance more than anything, you know. I try to create, if possible, an emotive bond within the sound or in a collaboration with somebody, you know. I don't want to produce something that's sterile with no kind of positive aesthetic to it. I've made some very dark pieces, from very melancholic pieces, some very aggressive pieces. But I want to find a place that is both contemplative but open enough. It's not too dominating. It doesn't force you to submit to it in that way. It's offering you a place to enter it, if you understand. Because I noticed it's become a very kind of popular kind of aesthetic in recent years, which is quite largely male-driven aesthetic of noise music in electronics, a very macho kind of stance, which is about the physicality of sound, which is phenomenal in that environment. And yet I wonder, you know, can you listen to that in your own environment in the same way? And it's interesting to note the differences between people making music for both a live environment and a recorded environment, you know. But I listen to all manner of things every day, and my opinions change all the time. You can ask me a question now, and I'll probably give you a different response another day in a way. But I try to tend not to move towards aggressive ways of persuading people, but more seductive, warm tools of sound and everything to kind of draw you inside. But also I'm a great reductionist. I try not to use too much stuff. I did production for an artist recently, and they sent me something like, for a piece of electronic music, quite minimal, 36 stems of music. And I thought, it's too much. To tell that story, you don't need 36 stems. You know, for myself, maybe I get to 10 maximum, but often it's 2 or 4. You know, that's sometimes all it needs. Music that sustained us for hundreds of years is music like piano music. We're listening to a single instrument played by one person quite often, and it's sustained for hundreds of years and still works today and will work for however many years we have left on this planet, you know. And I think it's important to remember that at times. It's very easy to get wrapped up in ideas of new technologies and what's possible and ways of redefining sound, and I get very excited by this. And yet at the same time, it's important to go back to the roots and see what really works. So many pieces I make are simply stereo pieces that I've just played live, and that's it.